Charlotte, 2026. They are coming off a 1-11 season. Yes, 1-11 after they got their supposed crown jewel head coach, Tim Albin. What happened? This video will talk about that, talk about the health of the program, the roster, and give a prediction for the upcoming season. But no surprise. That was a disaster. It needs to be corrected quickly. Charlotte is not the best team in terms of resource. They, in fact, are only 103rd in recruiting this year. They're not using the portal a lot. Tim Albin is a developmental coach. Came over from Ohio, where he was awesome. He led them to 10-win seasons, 3 straight seasons before he came over and took the Charlotte job. They're not going to use the portal. They're not going to be among the elite recruiting. So the answer is kind of going to have to come from development. But in general, this team is 10th in talent acquisition in the American over the last 3 seasons. And there's only 14 teams in the conference. Last year, their only win was against Monmouth, and that was a 42-35 game. So it was a tough season. A lot needs to change quickly for Tim Albin. Fortunately, I'm a Tim Albin guy. Loved what he did with Ohio. You should be at least optimistic there will be some improvement. Now, is that a bowl or is that 3 wins? Let's take a look at the roster. We'll go position by position, starting with QB. You can see how experienced the players are with the snaps in the middle of the screen. There's a recruiting ranking, whether they were a 2, 3, 4, or 5-star, or in the case of Cole Gonzalez, not recruited at all. And then a value score. That's a 0 to 100 scale. 100 are all conference players, 50 is about average. Starting quarterback for Charlotte is allegedly going to be Cole Gonzalez. Pitt transfer, didn't play at Pitt. Previously saw him in the FCS with Western Carolina running that air raid system they had down there. He's been pretty productive. It's just come at a low level of competition. But he was running an air raid. The main concerns are 42 big-time throws, 41 turnover-worthy plays. That was in the FCS. And when you break down the percentile, that was 70th percentile in 2024. That's right on the borderline of productive FBS players. So this is kind of a dice roll. Now, they do have Connor Harrell back coming off a severe injury. Grayson Loftus is also back. Horrible when we saw him play. Maybe there's some optimism with like a Harrell, the former North Carolina transfer. Could he come back and be a bit better? Maybe. Ultimately, I do think you probably see more than one QB this season unless Gonzalez is an absolute stud. He's 6'5", 200 pounds, but one other thing he can do a little bit is run. He did have 563 rushing yards, which was 3.5 yards per carry, only a 14% pressure to sack ratio. But however you want to cut this up, we still have Charlotte ranked 12th at QB in the American, which, believe it or not, is a pretty big step forward for them after they were one of the worst teams passing the ball in the country last year. Receiver. So they're going the low-level transfer route for the most part. There are a couple interesting players that come from the FBS and the Power 4, but they're losing almost everyone. Javen Nicholas went to Duke. EJ Mason he graduated. Sean Brown graduated as well. So let's just start with the transfers. Like a Jaden Barnes is projected to lead this group. He's small, 5'8", 170, but he did have 55 catches. 2.0 yards per route is elite. He is a slot receiver. But even before he went and transferred up, this is the guy that previously was in the FCS with Austin Peay. It did translate well, but now you need to figure it out in a different scheme. You have SEMO transfer, Cam Pedro. He was 66th percentile in the FCS, so kind of right on that borderline again. But he originally began his career with Marshall, so you're not looking at a completely under-recruited player. The other concern is redundancy. He's 5'11", 180. He was a 91% slot player. He'll probably move outside with Barnes in the slot, but there's redundancy. Also, like a Tank Boston, he's 5'11", 190, not the biggest there either. He comes from NC State, and he was a top 1,000 recruit, so he should play or at least get the opportunity just based on talent, but not a layup there either. Even like the Zaheem Kollick is 5'11", 165. You don't have one guy that's 6 feet tall among your top 4. And Kollick was a 62nd percentile Bryant transfer. Now, even at his size, 5'11", 165, he played out wide a ton. It's just, does that really translate to the FBS? I'm not sure. Derek Ely's the most experienced, 89 snaps for him. Now, Ely's at least 6 feet tall, but he's a 0-star recruit. You have like a Jalen Hampton, from Western Kentucky. Adam Hopkins is a former 4-star from Colorado. only 4 career receptions, but his development was kind of stunted when they were asking him to play defense earlier in his career. He's a complete wild card. Does he play defense? Does he play offense? Does he play a lot in offense? Is he going to live up to the 4-star ever? I don't know. They rank 11th in the American at wide receiver. I tend to think they'll be better than last year because you've at least added some transfers that have like a recruiting background you'd be impressed with. Not just Hopkins, but like a Tank Boston. So it's a better blend than they had last year. I'm still not sure it's talented enough to like reach a bowl, but I would argue it's better. Tight end, they're going the low level again. They do return Gus McGee, who's pretty good in terms of size, at least. 6'5", 250. He caught 14 balls, but he was a pretty good blocker. He's also like in year 7, so he's very, very experienced, at least in terms of practice. He should be your starter. I imagine you're looking at like a Logan Malden from McNeese State as your secondary tight end. He was 65th percentile in the FCS coming from McNeese, but he originally was with Coastal Carolina. So not another guy. He is another guy that was not originally an FCS recruit. Previously, he was at a Sun Belt school, so not really super concerned with him. He caught 27 balls. Logan Waddle is over from Georgia State, only played 321 snaps, below average blocker, so probably more your rotational guy, third tight end maybe. This unit's 9th in the American. It's certainly not bad. Offensive line. So last year, 126th in pass blocking, 104th in run blocking. Mo Clipper goes to Georgia Southern. Dallas Shirley, Mason Bowers, and Jesse Rammel all graduated. You do bring in a couple interesting players. The first one is Penn State 4-star Javen Williams. He doesn't have any experience, at least a lot of it. He's played a handful of snaps in his career, 141 to be exact. But he's flash on them. He's 315 pounds, and he's a former 4-star coming down to get more playing time. Should be an upgrade. Christos Fernandez is the favorite for right tackle. He's a former Long Island transfer. I don't know, man. So this is the problem with taking FCS guys. You don't know how they're going to project in the FBS. You can use their percentiles to get a guess. And this is kind of where that cutoff comes in. We were talking about like 70th percentile FCS guys. Fernandez was 53rd, which is not, that's like barely above average in the FCS. So generally that means a step back in the FBS, and that's what happened. 31st percentile. 31st percentile at right tackle. Can't have it, man. Can't have it. He needs to be developed or benched. Straight up. Then you get to some of the other players, like who are the options if he does get benched? Charlotte is very heavy in the JUCO ranks, like Amar Harper, Dylan, Nolan Cook. Those guys have experience. It's just at the JUCO level. Could one of them win the job? Honestly, I think it would be an upgrade. You get inside. Luke Sandy, probably your favorite at left guard. He's played over 500 snaps in his career. Consistently above average, just never worked in a full-time role, which kind of makes sense. You got to play against like Wes King out there, who's just straight up. Wes King's never allowed a sack in his career. When you're playing behind him, it's nothing that you did wrong. Wes King's just a stud. So Luke Sandy should be okay. We have him projected as an above-average starter. Main transfer, New Crushy is a starter at center. He played 3 years in the FCS. It did come with some concerns, though. First 2 years below average in the FCS, and last year he was 63rd percentile, so we're asking another jump. That's a lot to ask. Rod Green, probably the favorite at the final guard spot. There's not much really to talk about with him. He was a better run blocker than pass blocker, but the depth is pretty weak here. Like Adam Silva played 56 snaps. You have more JUCO guys. Reginald Pierre now, Virginia Union transfer, Matthias Nelson. The depth here is not great, but the starting group, I think, has some upside. And I think you could even increase that if you figure out what happens or what happened to Fernandez. Maybe you can develop him. I don't know. Offensive line ranks 13th in this conference. That's second to last. But I think there are some paths to them being a little bit better. Running back. So Rod Gainey goes to LSU, but Jeriel Cobb returns. He played 166 snaps as a freshman. Very inefficient. Fumbled once. 3.7 yards per carry. How much of that is him? How much of it is the infrastructure? I think there's a chance he gets beat out. Like Cincinnati transfer, Chance Williams came in. He hasn't played a ton either, and he's actually a former Grambling State transfer where he was 91st percentile, but never was able to really carve out a sizable role with Cincinnati. You have App State transfer, Kamani Alexander, another player who hasn't played a lot. He was ranked 1,362 in 2024. Do you go to a further depth? Of course, there's more JUCO guys like Demarion Petit from Coastal Carolina, originally with JUCO. Rutledge is still there. Henry Rutledge. He's basically a receiving back, but he has been pretty efficient. Maybe he can carve out a role. This unit's also 13th in the American. In general, the offense is expected to be improved, even if the ceiling still doesn't look that high. They have done some work, but maybe you could start to see some of the Tim Alvin magic in terms of development finally take root with this program. Defense. 130th in run defense last year, 122nd in pass rush. They lose most of their starting defense, which might not be a bad thing. Braden Mullen is gone at edge. Yamil Talib went to Colorado. Curtis Simpson is back as their most experienced edge with 353 snaps. 19 pressures. Not actually that bad, but the run defense was below average. He's 230 pounds, which shouldn't be crazy. If he's able to just develop a little bit, we're talking about a redshirt sophomore, maybe put on some weight, improve the run defense, we could be talking about a good player. Jalen Johnson also played over 300 snaps. He had 10 pressures, which isn't bad. Another player who wasn't the best in run defense, but not a size problem. He's 250. This was missed tackles. He missed 4 of them. You have like a DJ Burgess. He came out of JUCO last year, started week 1, went down with injury. Before he came over, he was the defensive player of the year in 2 straight years in JUCO. So there's some optimism there. Shaku Sangari, another player who comes over, this time from the FCS. 58th percentile there is not really that impressive, but he was a good run defender, and he's nearly 255 pounds. Inside, Jamarian Solomon played 353 snaps, a former FIU transfer. 20 pressures was all right, but it dropped with Charlotte. Run defense is all right too, but he's 270, so you're not talking about the biggest guy. I'm at least mildly concerned. Maceo Williams, another player who is a former transfer, basically played everywhere. Charlotte, Utah State, you name it, he's been okay in run defense, even at 280 pounds. Played at Kent State before. He has over 1,000 snaps now. I think he's fine. And that's kind of your upside in the inside. Just you get some run stuffers, clog up the middle. My main concern is like a Williams and Solomon aren't very big, 270 and 280. But Caleb Irvin's 290. He was originally a Purdue transfer. Wasn't great there. Catawba transfer, Dinas White comes over. I have no idea what to expect with him. He originally was a Florida State recruit, though. He was the 717th ranked player in his class. So probably at least some optimism for him. I don't know why he was down at Catawba, but that is what it is. Overall, we have this unit ranked 11th. That's the defensive line as a whole, combining edge and interior. It's not horrible. Not as bad as you might think. Linebacker. So Shea Taylor graduates. Reed Williford was actually a UDFA. They get back Caden Schmitz, who was second on the team in tackles, but still only average in run defense. Coverage, he allowed an 84% completion percentage, but he did have 2 interceptions, 2 BBUs. Former Ohio transfer, so some continuity with the staff and Tim Alvin. I think that's fine. I'm not real concerned with him. I think he'll be at least a decent starter for this defense. Nate Faunus needs to do a better job just straight up after they were 132nd last year. But again, he has continuity with Ohio, so I'm not coming out and really going to be too scared initially at least. But behind him, Caden Schmitz, that is, where are they going to go? Do they play like Gavin Willis again? 342 snaps last year. He was actually decent in coverage. The production before he got to Charlotte came from Bucknell. Now, he was a 100th percentile player with Bucknell. Started 2 games last year. I think he probably should have played more. But behind them, Stellan Bowman, Darius Wallace, there's not really a ton with this team overall. So last year they were 121st in coverage. They're losing a few players like a Dwight Boodle's probably the main one. He went to Arizona. And this secondary on paper still ranks 14th in the American based on our projections. But there's 2 points I want to highlight. The first one is if that is worst case scenario, I don't think it's substantially worse than your teams in the middle of the American. But there is some upside for them just flat out not to be worse in the conference. Like your corners. CJ Clinkscale Jr., he's a former Boston College transfer. He's played consistently above average. There are holes in his game. More of a boom bust player. The 75% completion percentage for 385 yards is not fantastic. You'd like to at least stop a few of the big plays, but he's certainly not a bad player. Jameel Croft is coming over from Kansas. He's seeking more playing time. So P4 transfer, top 1,000 recruit, a bit older. He's from 2023, but still, this is a player you'll take in a secondary you're looking to upgrade. Nickel is a bit of a concern. Colin Gill, I like that he's big. He's 6 feet, 210, which is good in run defense, where he did have 35 tackles. Coverage was a bit up and down like most of the other players in this secondary, but that's kind of a decent foundation. And then at safety, you have a Maryland transfer in Shamar McIntosh. Not the best recruit, but he comes over clearly seeking more playing time. Dylan Womack, he was a 0-star recruit that played 104 snaps last year. Pretty good in run defense, but I'm not even sure he'll win that job. You could see one of the JUCO guys like a JP Patterson, or maybe even one of the corners move over. They have a lot of JUCO secondary players coming in. Tredarius Smith, Zayden Lang Taylor, Nyreek Sharp. So the 14th ranked secondary has this like horrible projection on Womack in here. They could very well upgrade this, whether it's through development, Albin specialty, or just a different player. This is kind of their floor. So when you go to the overall depth chart and how these position groups stack up in the conference, Charlotte is power ranked 129th for us. That's not very good. Their win total is 2.5. It's juiced to the under. We're almost a full win ahead of that. We're at 3.55. So linebacker is the only position group really even touching average. But this was perhaps a team ranked like under 4 across the board last year in terms of rankings positionally. So they did upgrade some of these. And this is also sort of discounting Tim Albin, who there are coaching power rankings too. Coming into last year, Albin was near the top for just talent development. And then you had the bottoming out. I don't know if it was the change of scenery. There were a lot of injuries, so maybe it was just an untenable situation. It also takes time to get your players into new programs. And when they made the switch, their recruiting rankings dropped into the 150s. That's worse than 20 or so FBS schools. So yeah, it's going to take some time with Albin. That's another reason for slight optimism. When you look at the schedule, Citadel is a team power ranked in the 50s or 60s in the FCS. This should be a win. It's not a team contending in the FCS. Unfortunately, you got Ole Miss right after that, who's like an auto loss. So assuming you beat Citadel, which you should, you need to pick up 2 more wins. Now, the percentages don't look great on your screen. You play a down Louisiana, and then your most likely wins are like a Temple, UAB, East Carolina. Individually, none of those seem like good bets for wins. But when you look at the percentages over the course of an entire season, they're still more likely than not to win 2 of these games, which puts you at a win total over 2.5. Now, I know Charlotte fans probably don't want to hear, okay, you're looking at like a 3 or 4 win season. Again, they want to be making bowls and rebuild the program. I'm not sure they're right in that position yet. They're probably going to need a little bit more development. But just in terms of what the market is expecting, I'm a bit more optimistic overall than what a lot of other places are currently putting out there. So Charlotte for us, probably going to be a pass in the win total. And to be honest with you, I think you're just going to get better prices like on Louisiana in week 4, maybe App State in week 3. So rather than wait till November to cash your tickets, assuming you win, I think I'd rather just play them in late September for the same amount and hopefully find a way to profit with this team throughout the season and not just lock it up for the entire year.